once working with a specific woman who made some comments to me that stuck with me because of the power and because of how much it shook me up. I remember she was a woman who raised a large family, and I'm personally always amazed by people who raise such large families and give so much of themselves, because truly raising such a family and doing it right takes energy, takes focus, takes heart, so much of self. So I'm always struck by the whole thing. But here was a woman who I was just amazed by because she clearly struggled with significant anxiety. And throughout all that, with that tremendous struggle, she still raised this family with all her heart and gave so much. It was amazing to me. But she clearly didn't feel that way. She clearly didn't feel that way. I remember her saying so. She said to me, "Why do I have such thoughts? Where's my trust in God? Where's my trust? Where's my bitachon? Where's my trust in God? Where did it go? I know God's in control. So then why don't I trust him? Why do I have these anxious thoughts come into my head?" And then she said words that threw me for a loop. She looked at me and she said, "I'm such a failure. I'm such a loser. I have no trust." Boom. A woman who had done so much and she felt like a loser. She felt worthless because she felt like she had no trust, and that was so close to her heart. But was she right? Is that what it means? Is that what it means? Does it mean that if I have trust in God, I won't struggle with anxiety disorders? What about depression? If I have trust in God, if I know that everything God does is great, if I believe that God can do the impossible, will I be down and out? Will I feel those negative feelings? What do we tell our kids? Our kids come home and they're anxious about something. Do we say, "Don't feel anxious because God's in control"? Or is there another answer? We got to know the answers to this. And that's what I want to explain tonight. But before I get to that, I want to discuss something essential. And that is, through a mental health lens, what's the proper approach? Years ago, there was a fascinating study done. Someone had once said a line, I forget who it was, that, don't think about, you may never think about, say, a horse walking down the road. But as soon as you try not thinking about it, it'll come back doubly, right? It'll come back every moment you'll be thinking about it. So a researcher did a study on it, which we call the white bear phenomenon. And the idea was, if I took a crowd, and that's what he tested, and he said, don't think about a white bear. Don't think about it. Try not to think about a white bear. And every time they thought about it, they'd press a button. And then he took another group of people, and he said, you can't think about a white bear. You don't have to think about a white bear. If you want to, you will. If you don't want to, you won't. And what he found was that the crowd that was told not to think about a white bear had much more thoughts of having a white bear. Repressing the thoughts, trying to hold them back, caused me to have a much stronger feeling or thoughts of those thoughts come back to me much stronger. But it wasn't just that. What was amazing was that after he stopped the exercise, he took both groups and he said, you can think about whatever you want. You can think about a white bear, you can not think about a white bear, whatever you want, think about. But if you do think about a white bear, hit a button. And invariably, the crowd that in the past had tried not to think about a white bear, that beforehand had tried not to think about a white bear, now when they weren't trying to repress the thought, they could have whatever thought they wanted, they still thought about the white bear more than the other crowd. What we call the rebound effect. Trying to hold back a thought not only makes it worse, not only makes it come back more, but it will have a rebound effect that even after I stop trying to not think about it, I will still have more of those thoughts come back. And it has major ramifications. Because whenever we try not having a thought, we're going to have it worse. We're going to have it worse. And it's something that we have to realize. When this woman was sitting in this space and saying, I do not want to have those thoughts, I'm going to try not to have those anxious thoughts, because to me that means that I am missing in my trust in God. That's what it means if I have such thoughts. So I'm going to try to push them away. That caused those thoughts to come back more. So just in a mental health respect, through the mental health lens, trying not to have a thought is the worst possible thing we could do if we wanted not to have a thought. And we're going to get to that a little bit more later. But let's take it through a Bitachon standpoint, through a trust in God standpoint. It's mistaken. It's not true. There's a fascinating Rabbeinu Yonah in Misplaced that I advise everyone to see because it's life transforming. It's amazing what he writes there. But he asks a question. He wants to know, why is it? How do we find that Yaakov Avinu was afraid of getting hurt by Esav? Esav, his brother, was chasing him, and Yaakov was afraid. Vayira Yaakov. Yaakov was afraid. How was he afraid? Where was his bitachon? Where was his trust in God? Yaakov Avinu. Couldn't be he didn't trust in God. Where was his trust in God? And he says something fascinating. He said Yaakov was afraid. But after he was afraid, he strengthened himself with the knowledge that even though I'm afraid that I sinned and therefore God will punish me and my brother will hurt me, but my hope in the mercy of God is always greater than my fear. In other words, trust in God does not mean that I will not have anxious thoughts. That's not what it means. It's not what it's supposed to mean. Even Yaakov Avinu had anxious thoughts, and the reason is because if I worry about something, I'm afraid that God is going to punish me for sins that I did or whatever it is that's going on in my mind. Those are the thoughts that's going to come into my mind. You can't just push that off. Those thoughts don't come in because I decided. They're just there. I can't push those away. But what I can do is, and what I should do is, and what Bitachon does, what trust in God does, is that once I have those thoughts, I can move towards trust in God. I can calm myself through trust in God. I can cause myself to be less anxious through trust in God because I know that God is a merciful Father. And He takes care of me. So I don't have to fear. But what it doesn't do is say thoughts won't come into my mind. So when we talk about anxiety and trust in God is not the opposite of anxiety. That's incorrect. Because trust in God does not mean that I will not have anxious thoughts come to my mind. I will have anxious thoughts come to my mind. But with my trust in God, what I can do is I can calm myself. I can feel better because I know God is a merciful Father. That's what Bitachon does. And even through a mental health aspect, the last thing we want to do is try to force ourselves not to have thoughts. Because when we do that, we just cause that those thoughts come back stronger. And if we got that from this message, that would be huge. But there's so much more. Because the truth is that trusting God can play a major role in overcoming anxiety when it's done correctly and when it's used correctly. And that's what I want to explain. Remember we talked about the white bear phenomenon? We said that when I try to repress a thought, it comes back. And not only does it come back, not only does it come back more, but even after I stop trying to repress it, there's a rebound effect and it comes back even later. Why does that happen? What's the mechanism? How does that work? Very important to recognize, because this will explain so much about anxiety and so much about how we can help ourselves overcome anxiety. There's a filter in our brain that tells us what's important to focus on. And it's vital for our very survival. For example, make calls in a car, right? You're driving. I make calls in the car all the time. I think I do it a little different than other people. Other people get in the car, they're in the car, and they make calls when they're in the car. By me, I'm this jumpy guy, and I can't sit straight, so when I need to make a call, I get in the car to make a call, and I drive around, because then I can concentrate better, because I'm not so jumping around. So I get in the car, and I'm driving, and I have an important phone call. I don't notice the cars around me. I don't know what colors they are. I don't even know how many cars I passed. I'll stop by the stop signs, but I don't even know how many stop signs I passed. But isn't it interesting that if I was driving down the road and all of a sudden the car in front of me slammed on the brakes, what do? Invariably, I get completely zoned in on slamming on my brakes. And I'll come to a halt right before the next guy. But during those moments, I have no idea what happened in my ear. I have no idea what was going through that Bluetooth earset. I have no idea, because I'm completely zoned in on the car in front of me and stopping. There was a filter that told my brain, this is less important, this is more important, zone in on this, and stay alive. And that's what keeps me alive. Same thing that keeps me alive if I'm walking down the street and I see something from the side of some guy coming to attack me, and my brain all of a sudden gets super focused on that and keeps me away. How does my brain know that? Well, the way that the filter is turned on, the way that it says this thing is it should focus on is if this is important to me. If it matters to me. Some things are very important, some things are less important, but if this thing is something that matters to me, if it's something that bothers me, if it's something that makes a difference to me, that turns on these red flags that says, focus on that thought. And because I could have a million different thoughts going through my head in any given day. I walk down the road, there's so much stimuli, there's that grass and the cars, but I need to focus on what's important, otherwise I'll never get anything done because I'll keep on being sidetracked. It doesn't just only work with things that are life and death. I buy a new suit, I buy a new car, all of a sudden I notice everyone else's color of their suit and what they're wearing. All of a sudden I notice how many blue whatever cars I'm driving. There's so many, it's not just me. It plays a role in everything we do. But the way that it works is, if this thought matters, if it bothers me, if it plays a role in my life, especially if it's a major role, I will get zoned in on that thought. Now, the most natural thing we can do when faced with negative thoughts is to try not to have them. That is literally the most natural base thing that we will do. It's how a baby survives in the world. A baby is born, what does it know? If something bothers me, I cry. If something doesn't bother me, hopefully I'm okay. And then over time, when I touch something that hurts, I stop touching it. We stay away from what hurts and we move towards what's most comfortable. So when I have an anxious thought coming through my head and it doesn't make me comfortable and it makes me feel uncomfortable, it causes me discomfort, what do? I try not to have it. I try not to have it. That's the most natural thing we can do. The most natural. But when I try not to have a thought, it's going to cause it to come back stronger. It's going to cause it to come back stronger because what that does is it tells my mind this is something that matters. This thought is bad. I don't want to have it. So then whenever the mind starts feeling that thought coming to its head, it zones in on it. So instead of making it go away, it causes those thoughts to keep on coming back. The same thing happens to a much larger degree if I say this thought is bad. If I tell myself having a thought about anxiety is bad because I should have trust in God, what that will do is it will cause my brain to be hyper-focused on any thought like that. And any time such a thought crosses my mind, I have it again and again and again and again and again. And it becomes recurring. So not only does it make it sort of like come back, it creates this whole mess because this is important to me and the brain knows I got to focus on this. Now, what about if we did something else? Imagine whenever we had that thought, we would be able to accept that thought without us being thrown off by it. In a calm way, because it's okay to have that thought. It's okay. It's just my brain trying to keep me safe. Maybe I went through some trauma, and this is my brain's way of trying to keep me safe. Or maybe it's something that matters very much to me for whatever reason, so my brain is saying this is important. But I allow that thought to come in. I'm not thrown off by it. It's okay. And not only that, when it comes to thoughts about anxiety with trust in God, I tell myself, okay, that's my thought. And now I'll move towards trust in God. I'll be okay with it. I'll calm myself down. The more I do this, the more that my mind now feels at ease. And those thoughts stop mattering so much because I move towards trusting God. I'm okay with having that thought. And I move towards trusting God. And I feel calm. And again, this isn't the answer to all of anxiety. Anxiety is huge and it's debilitating. And when it's strong, it's like a recurring thought that we can't get out of our head. And it becomes a constant worry. And trying to get out of it, it can be impossible without help. And that's why, and anxiety is so treatable. Of all mental health struggles, it's from the most treatable in general. Not every case, but in general. So reach out for help, get help. Because there's so much to do and you can live a life of success, of happiness. You don't need this on your shoulders. But just talking about this concept of anxiety and trust in God, when I'm able to accept that thought and not be thrown off by it, and then calm myself down, the mind stops being so turned on. The filter stops being so focused on it because it's okay. And over time, that will lessen that sort of hypervigilance, and those thoughts can slowly calm down. We can slowly be okay with it. That's a approach that we can use. You could use in the office, working one-on-one with people, maybe in slightly different ways, but in an overarching theme. Anxiety can be a help when it comes. Trusting God can be a help when it comes to anxiety. But if we use it wrong, like we were talking about before, if we think that trusting God means that I'm not going to have any anxious thoughts and having anxious thoughts are bad, if that's what I think, it's going to be much worse. Because that will cause that sort of repressing thoughts, causing them to come back, and the rebound effect, the white bear effect. It will cause them to come back even worse. But when I do that, and it's not even what trusting God means, right? It's not even what trusting God means. It's even wrong. It's mistaken. But when I do the other thing, when I'm able to take a step back and be okay with having that thought, because it doesn't mean that I don't have trust in God, and it's normal and natural, and it's my body's just basic response to try to keep me safe. And then when I take it and I move towards trusting God, I move towards it, not try to push out thoughts, but move towards it to cause it to calm myself down, then over time these thoughts stop mattering so much because they don't throw me off so much. And then the recurring pattern can slowly be broken. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.